understand they go to a 40, but at least it was my understanding back in the day, before they even got anything, I think they tried to make sure they got the additional 2 hours, did they not?
I'm sure if I talked to the codes, or the CST sergeant, he would tell me everyone gets a decent amount of overtime. But then again, these guys that work patrol will tell you the same thing. They're all getting plenty of overtime these days, because you're short people and bodies to do this. So, and now, training, I don't know. I don't know that training and the code officer would see a lot.
Maybe during events,
Yes.
but probably not the daily grind.
Well, like everyone's working this weekend, we know that. But normal week, I don't think Officer Lamp sees much overtime. I don't think the training unit sees much overtime, because the new hires come in, correct me if I'm wrong, Captain, they're on an admin schedule. The phase 1 is 8 to 4, 8 to 5, every day. So.
You're talking about the new hires.
Right. Well, those are who the training department is largely overseeing and working.
Oh, because they work the ham and egg or schedule, if you will, they're not.
They're working Monday to Friday and not getting as much. Now, I do, like I said, I'm sure.
All hands on deck during events and all that. All right, so basically, the proposal is, anybody who's not currently getting the 5 stipend that's covered under 31.6 should be moved to the 5 or 6.
Correct. Like the way you said that.
So, is SRO, seems like we moved several recently to the.
Right, SRO and motors were two contracts ago, I believe, we moved them into the 5%. And then others have gotten the $20 a week. And I still believe in that for your part-time, we'll call them part-time assignments. The MET team that I know you're on this, right? Assignments that are not your full-time job every day. There's still a $20 incentive that comes along with the responsibility and the expertise that job requires, but it's not your full-time assignment. Like Greg's full-time assignment is in the detective bureau, so he gets compensated for that as a percentage.
And as an additional, being on the clandestine live team,
Right.
he gets the stipend,
Which
when he
is-
has to go to that.
Exactly.
All right, yep, I'm following you.
Okay.
I get it.
31.3, something that I know other agencies do, it's come up a lot here. When you leave a specialty assignment, you still have that experience that's valuable, that can be used on the road, if that's where you're going. And a lot of our detectives in particular have brought up keeping some, not all necessarily, but some of their detective pay when they return to the road. And where this is also an issue is in regard to promotions. Right now, if I'm a detective and I get promoted, I essentially am only getting a 10% raise for my promotion, because I have to give up my 5% in CID pay, and now I'm going to be a sergeant at night and get 15%, so I'm 10% up.
But I hear you.
And
now you're on the 42 schedule versus
True.
the 40 schedule.
But I know there are some specialty unit members who have chosen, at least in the past, I don't know what it'll be like this summer, the new testing, but there are some people who have opted out of going for a sergeant promotion because they didn't want to essentially only get a 10% raise to do it. And
Well,
those are often
they go to nights too. I mean,
well, sure. But those are people that a lot of times you would want taking that promotion test. They've already proven their value to the agency in putting in for and being appointed to a specialty unit, and that experience might be valuable as a newly appointed sergeant. And then you have folks that they've done their time maybe in the drug unit, or they've done their time on motors and they're ready to go back to the road, and they bring with them that experience that the other officers on that shift are not necessarily going to have, and there's a benefit to the taxpayer, to the city, in that Ryan can go work at night, having been a motor for a few years, and have much more in-depth experience in dealing with crashes, and passing that knowledge on to what are often younger officers on the shift with them. There's a value to the city in that, we think, And whether it's 2%, 3%, you do X amount per year that you were on the unit, we just think there's some formula there that we could probably come to an agreement on that would properly reward these guys for the work they've done while in.
What happens when they get back on? Like if I, you know, I'm on CST or whatever,
Then
I'm
you go
on
back to it on.
and then I hold, you know, I don't know, for argument's sake, all of it.
I
Kind of the proposal.
I think that's a fair point, and I'm not.
I don't want to stack, look, I don't know if that's the right word.
It
I go
is.
CD for a
It would
year.
be one and done. Well, once you receive the specialty unit pay one time in your career, you never.
But then you keep it, but then, so if I get reassigned, I get that 5 at that point, again, but I would lose that stipend on my way back out, or I wouldn't even get another
A
stipend?
clean way of doing it is just eliminating all these specialty unit pays, and we could discuss this, instead of having a motor or a CID school, just have a generic one pay code specialty unit pay. It's 5%. And then if you stay on that unit for X amount of years, let's just say 5 years, in good standing, you leave, keep your 5%. You already have in your pay code your specialty unit pay. You go to another specialty unit, you're already getting specialty unit pay. You're not getting another 5% on top of the 5 you had. And this way you don't have all confusing pay codes. You don't have to eliminate one pay code for Ryan leaves motors and goes to CID, so they have to eliminate his. So motors pay code, now give them CID. You just have a one pay code for a specialty unit. It's probably be a lot cleaner, probably be easier for bookkeeping. And
So basically, everybody gets it, except for basically the new officers who haven't been on a specialty unit yet.
And there's no cost to the city to institute it because everybody's already getting it. The only time there will be a new cost is when someone that's never been on a specialty unit goes to a specialty unit. And that's not a whole
But
lot.
conversely, nobody ever loses it.
Correct, you would not lose it.
Because right now, it's basically the trade-off, right? So
You
one
wouldn't-
comes
Now,
out,
if you went, there are guys that go to specialty unit in a year or two, they don't like it, or
Or-
they're not pulling their weight and they wash out,
or they want to do something.
or they want to do something else, this isn't what I want to do, I don't like riding a motorcycle. And we're not saying they should keep,
Canine.
we're not saying they should keep the 5%, but if we can have it where you've been there for, in good standing for, a decent amount of time.
You keep a portion of your dough on your way out.
I mean, I know, it almost feels like going back to patrol is a punishment, because I mean, 5% is a nice chunk of pay. I mean, and if you go back to patrol, you're losing that. And it's almost like a form of punishment. You don't want them to feel that going back to patrol is a form of punishment, because it shouldn't.
Yeah, so I understand that, but typically, at least my understanding of the history, and I'm not just talking about in Daytona Beach, I'm talking about in general. Typically, the 5% came about because you're losing the built-in OT. It's not necessarily because you're getting the prestigious assignment of being in CID or on motors or on K9. However, here what it sounds like is even when I'm on one of those, I'm getting all the overtime I really can handle, right? So even though I'm technically no longer on a 42, I'm never working 40. I'm always above 40, is what it seems like.
Well, I think some
So
units.
here it's
work
kind of
over-
turned into, it is the 5% for recognizing that you're on a specialty unit and not as a makeup of losing the built-in 2 hours of OT a week.
I mean, I think it's still a way to compensate them for that. Some units get more overtime than others. Now, again, current scenario today, these guys can work all the overtime they want. There's enough patrol overtime that gets advertised for every week that even a detective can go suit up and pick up overtime. But as far as that built-in, that 42 versus the 40, like you mentioned, there's still a structural difference in their days. Not to mention, a patrol officer is going to work 7 out of every 14 days by their schedule. All of these specialty units we're talking about are working more than that. Some are working 8 out of every 14, some are working 10 out of every 14, depending on, are they on 410s, are they on 5/8s? Like training, I think, is on 5/8s, quite a bit. And, whereas motors is 410. Detectives, most of them are 410s. So it's just a,
And then the 5th day gives them a chance to either work a detail or an overtime.
and a lot of them do. A lot of
Yeah.
them do, because there's such a need right now
Yeah.
to get extra bodies out there picking up some of this patrol overtime.
Okay, all right, I understand the proposal.
Okay.
As far as on the way, removing the assignment of whatever, because of the experience, knowledge you gain, you keep a piece of the money on your way back to the patrol, if you will, right? A different assignment. Okay.
Almost done, Jim.
I got all day, man.
Next up is a much simpler one. Some of our members have brought up that they, unlike their colleagues in other agencies, they don't have the ability to use their assigned cars when they're off duty. And I'm not talking just to go out and drink and do whatever, but if a detective, let's say, who needs to be able to respond on call, lives in one part of the county and is in another part of the county on their day off, but can't take their assigned car with them, then when they do get called to respond, it doesn't work. It becomes too much of a lift to get that person in. So what we're asking for is nothing crazy. It's what a lot of agencies do, which is to allow them, when they're not going drinking, when they're not going out partying, to be able to take their assigned car with them for everyday event, everyday life activities, grocery shopping, whatever. I'm going up to see a buddy in another part of the town, I'm going to go to the gym, whatever, so that they have their vehicle with them for these standby moments that they have. And as we talked about, for a lot of these folks, they're going to get that call. It's highly likely they're going to be called in for a THI, for a night shift.
So one of the things we're dealing with on the risk side is there's case law out there that officers' use of a squad car or any city vehicle is not covered under the city's health auto insurance. We're self-insured, but we've currently got like 4 off-duty accidents, and we're stuck. Kind of paid the claims in the past. Luckily, there's been no catastrophic accidents. They're usually fender benders and nonsense. We kind of pay the claim and move on with our lives. That's technically unlawful to do. So we're struggling with how do we handle that on other cities have already moved to require officers to have insurance on the vehicle for their to and from work. We're looking at
right.
What I don't know is if I somehow authorize use of the city vehicle for any use, how that affects the health insurance, the auto insurance side of it. So I can look into that and see, you know, what this entails and use a personal vehicle. I think could be a dangerous scenario. I mean, I don't know if you want to take your 6-year-old to daycare in a squad car.
Places that do it.
I'm not saying
I think it'd be a personal choice. If Sterling wants to do that with his kids, that's up to him. He may or may not want to do that. Some people do, some people.
So literally, it's not the city going, you can't use our car. I mean, it's about the insurance and liability of that use of the vehicle. That's what it amounts to, right? And then, you know, if I can sit here with a straight face and say, you know, we haven't had any off-duty accidents, so maybe this wouldn't be a bad thing to try. I'm literally sitting on 4 off-duty accidents. That, again, we're paying the claims.
Because you're self-insured.
Right. Well, mainly because we're self-insured, for sure. So, listen, we can look at that. You know, it's clearly an extra liability.
No doubt, and I think there's probably a rider that comes along with that these guys would have to have too.
Well,
other places do this, so it may not be.
Do you know if the officer has to provide their, because that's what we've been kicking around, and the other jurisdictions have been kicking around. I think Volusia County might have finally pulled the trigger on it. Maybe they haven't. Like, we're all just sitting back in no man's land praying that nobody gets in off-duty accidents, where we've actually got to implement the policy. Now, clearly our policy already says if you're off doing something stupid in your squad car, and it's not covered under the course and scope of your job, you're not gonna have coverage, like our policy already says that. So if you're drag racing on the weekend.
Right, well,
you're-
that's-
you know, we're not covering the accident.
Well, I guess one of the examples, I'll just give you this. If you're an undercover detective and you have a not even a non-marked, but a true civilian style vehicle.
West Virginia tag or
Right,
whatever.
exactly, it's a rental car,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be. In agencies that have these, for example, the sheriff's office, their undercover detectives drive that everywhere. Again, unless they're going out and they know they're gonna go out to a bar or whatever, that's another story. But they pick up their kids at school in it, they go to the gym in it, they go grocery shopping in it, because it is part of the upkeep of their undercover image.
Yeah, I see.
So there's a way, Jim, I don't know the ins and outs on it to say for sure how that works legally, but I'm sure we can get to that here at some point and figure it out, because that's what I know the undercover officers, the undercover detectives in the sheriff's office do that today. So, and one of the people that brought this forward was an undercover detective, so who's no doubt aware that his colleagues in green are able to do that. Article 34, this is an old practice that I don't know when exactly it went away, but we've had some people bring it up. They'd like the ability to bid for east or west in addition to, or in lieu of, bidding for day or night. And apparently used to be the case here long ago. You hear that one?
Yeah, when I first started, we were doing that, but it was maybe 3 or 4 years after I started that it changed.
It just, you know, you've got two very different sides of the city. Some people might want to work specifically on the east side. Some people might specifically want to work on the west side. However it was done in the past, I'm sure we'd be open to just going back to that. And then we get to the pension, and this is the last items we have, arguably the most significant. The 20-year retirement that is enjoyed by everyone hired prior to August of 2014 is something that now a majority of the members who are in the 25-year retirement would like to see come back. And when you look at your biggest competitor and you look at the realities we've already articulated here today on recruitment and retention, this is maybe the single biggest thing the city can do today to fix that recruitment and retention problem, which is to allow these guys that right now have to work 25 years to retire, that would have to work 30 years to retire with the sheriff's office, to retire at 20 years as
It's 25.
it's 30 years. FRS is 30 years.
Special risk, I know it changed to 30, but then it come back to like 28.
Yeah.
They've been talking about trying to bring it back down to
It
25.
could eventually.
It was 25, I meant for, you know, during my earlier days, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it used to be 25, they went to 30 in 2011, I believe they went to 30.
11 or 12, yeah, it was right.
And, or it might have taken effect in 2012, but it was, 2011 was the session we did it.
That's when they added the 3% too, I think.
Right.
In that same session.
Right. So, look, we get that this is a cost item, this is
Who do you
something.
consider our biggest competitor?
Sheriff's office. The sheriff's
You said
office.
they're third.
What's that? And
You
they're
said
30, yeah.
third.
Well, and yet you still lose people to it. And for folks that are in a 25-year retirement, maybe they're looking at it going, 25, 30, it's not significant enough for it to matter. I'm gonna go take that job with the county. Now, we all know, with the sheriff being a constitutional officer, whatever we come up with, we could go to a 20, 20, and 20, Jim, for each of the next 3 years here in pay, and the sheriff can still come in at $1 more, because he controls his budget in a way that the
He
chief here.
doesn't control his budget.
Well, he controls how he spends it. He's given a dollar amount, and he can spend it however he sees fit, and whatever we come up with for wages
The
here,
legislative body is still the county commission.
it is, but, I mean,
So nonetheless, but I hear you. I mean,
the one thing he can't outdo you guys on is pension. because he's stuck with FRS.
Without a doubt.
And this, to me, in talking to a lot of these 2014 and newer hires, this is the single biggest reason people are leaving, is the 25-year retirement when they can go to other cities and do 20. And not to mention, they're leaving the profession and all that. A 20-year retirement, which I know, again, is not free.
Did you
It's
get
a
the
change.
cost?
I did. I've got the cost study here, which
Cost
is
per se.
$300,000. And I am not against, the membership is not against footing some of that cost. With the 185 money alone, we think that would be the perfect way to spend excess $185, is to help pay down that $300,000 cost. I think if the city came to the decision that, yes, we're going to bring that back for everyone hired since 2014 and prospectively going forward, it's just a matter of how we pay for it. I'll commit to you that we'll help find a way to pay for it, either through 185 money, through the participants in this 20-year retirement starting to pay for that in some way. Maybe the raises are just slightly less for those hired since 2014 than those hired prior to 2014 to help offset the cost of this. Because again, I know it's not free. The city made this change years ago, among others, for a reason. This is the single biggest one that we feel has to be rolled back just for the sake of competition to recruit and retain. I know I sound like a broken record at this point, recruitment and retention.
That's the theme, right?
It is. And this,
Everything that we can do.
this to talk to, if you talk to folks that, and we got one of them here in this room, that are hired with a 25-year retirement, they will tell you, other than maybe across the board wages, this is the single biggest item that now I'm gonna estimate, Joe, probably 60% of the membership is in that, with the spate of retirements we've had in the last couple of years and people leaving for other jobs. This is now a majority of your workforce that is at risk of being poached by other agencies. So I can't stress enough. This is I know it's a big ask, Jim. You guys in the city have not always been great about wanting to roll back pension changes. This is one that we feel needs to be rolled back. I think the chief feel needs to be rolled back as well to give that extra tool to keep people. And then
Yeah, I was gonna say, I see the next one's the COLA.
right, that one's one
Did
we've
you get
talked
a
about.
cost on that?
We didn't cost that out, but I think even you and I have discussed, with the COLA fund that's there now, it probably has a very minimal, if any, impact, because we're of course going to agree to use the COLA fund